Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a look at a very familiar face. We're talking about television's most notoriously unlucky in love character, Ross Geller. You know the guy, right? The lovable paleontologist with a soft heart, that somewhat questionable penchant for leather pants, and a remarkably long history of romantic disasters. Normally, we watch his relationships crumble and just, laugh it off as classic sitcom hijinks. But today, we're doing something a little different. We're looking right past the sitcom laughs to uncover a fascinating hidden layer to his story. Okay, let's dive into this. Were all of his romantic disasters really just bad timing? A string of terrible coincidences and him simply just being himself? Or is there a darker, quieter pattern hiding underneath it all? A pattern he simply couldn't admit to himself?
Well, that brings us to our core thesis for today. Divorce wasn't his bad luck, it was his pattern. When we really sit down and analyze the source material, a totally different story emerges. The real problem wasn't the women who left him. Honestly, the uncomfortable truth is that the problem was the very specific, deeply flawed way he loved them.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. We all casually digest the sitcom myth. You know the one, that he's just an unlucky nice guy full of good intentions who just happens to be a perpetual victim of bad timing. But the uncomfortable reality is entirely different. This is a man who carries heavy emotional baggage, continually rushes into commitment, and anxiously demands certainty. We're shifting from the surface-level joke we all know to a highly relatable, realistic psychological study. And we're going to break it all down right now.
Section 1. The unfinished baggage.
On the surface, his first marriage to Carol just seemed like a young love story that drifted apart due to some massive life changes. But looking a bit deeper, we see the absolute definition of emotional baggage. He didn't just struggle with Carol leaving. He actively refused to let go with any kind of maturity. Remember his constant paranoid intrusions into her new life? His overwhelming jealousy of Susan? He literally could not accept her new identity or her new reality. And by refusing to adapt, he took all of that unresolved history and carried it into every single future relationship. It's like a heavy suitcase he absolutely refused to set down. You simply cannot enter your next love as a fresh person when you're still emotionally living in the wreckage of your first one. He poisoned the well for his future romances before they even began. Section 2. The rushed foundation. Let's move to and see how this builds. On paper, Emily seemed like an incredible, fast, passionate dream. But that blazing intensity masked some really deep cracks, starting with a completely rushed commitment. Proposing after just 6 weeks of dating, that is a textbook example of jumping in without fully resolving the emotional attachments of your past. And that immediately led to the next phase, fragile trust. Because there was no real foundation built over time, the relationship just couldn't handle any actual weight or adversity. Which inevitably brings us to that single, infamous mistake at the altar, saying Rachel's name. And finally, the breaking point. We so often blame this entire relationship's failure on that one massive blunder during the vows. But the truth is, the relationship was already buckling under immense pressure long before that mistake ever happened. A total lack of a true foundation caused it to collapse. Urgency had become his biggest enemy.
Section 3. Rachel. The certainty trap.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Rachel is, without a doubt, the most chaotic and legendary relationship of the bunch. But if we strip away the famous "We Were on a Break" comedy, a fascinating pattern emerges across all three of these marriages. With Carol, the surface reason for the end was her changing identity, but the real emotional flaw, his total refusal to let go and adjust. With Emily, the surface reason was saying the wrong name, but the real flaw was building a rushed foundation over unresolved history. And then we have Rachel. The surface reasons we always point to are a drunken Vegas wedding or simple miscommunication. But the core emotional flaw was his demand for immediate certainty over patience. Think about the infamous pro-con list or hiring a barbershop quartet to literally mark his territory at her new office. Rachel was the absolute peak of his inability to just sit in uncertainty. He needed love to find so quickly and so immediately that the pressure literally broke the relationship in the exact spaces where patience should have been.
Section 4. The hidden emotional pattern.
So looking at all of this, we have to ask a pretty uncomfortable question. Was he really just a guy with terrible luck, or was he actually repeating the exact same emotional rhythm every single time? What we're actually looking at here is a classic psychological concept known as anxious attachment style. He exhibits these core contradictory habits perfectly. He clearly loves deeply, but he does it anxiously. He commits incredibly quickly, but he processes his emotions very slowly. He desperately wants certainty, but completely struggles with the natural timing of relationships.
Across every relationship, these traits don't just briefly appear, they stack up. The anxiety drives him to force commitments before the foundation is even dry. Make no mistake, he deeply cares. But caring without emotional balance, without understanding your own attachment style, it always causes damage.
Section 5. The mirror for all of us. So, the crucial point is, as we enter the final phase of this explainer, we have to recognize something incredibly important. If every single divorce was actually his fault, it doesn't make him a villain. Honestly, it just makes him incredibly human. The crucial point is that predictability in love is dangerous when it's left unexamined. It wasn't malice or bad intentions that ruined his relationships, it was his unexamined predictability. His total lack of self-awareness is what kept sabotaging him. He was a man constantly trying to outrun his own emotional patterns, until life simply kept catching up to him. And that is exactly why this television character remains so intimately relatable to us, even decades later. His dramatic, televised mistakes are actually our own everyday habits staring right back at us. We rush into things before we're ready. We cling tightly to the past because it feels safe. We react impulsively instead of communicating. We overcorrect our mistakes, swinging the pendulum entirely too far in the opposite direction. And the most dangerous one of all? We call it fate when it falls apart. We throw our hands up and blame the universe rather than looking at our own anxious attachments. The solution to this isn't pointing fingers or assigning blame. The solution is awareness. It's learning to slow down. I want to leave you with this final, challenging thought. How many times do we confuse urgency with love? It's time to look inward. How often do we repeat our very own emotional mistakes, blindly follow our own destructive patterns, and then call it destiny instead of taking responsibility for our behavior? Let that sink in. It completely reframes a character we thought we knew, and maybe, just maybe, it reframes how we look at ourselves. Thank you for joining me for this explainer.